What is up, guys? We are here for week 8 with the DFS Power Hour. We have Peter Jennings with us this week from Fantasy Labs and the Action Network. Pete, man, what's up? You ready for week 8?
I'm stoked for week 8. Happy to be with you guys. And yeah, this is a great slate, probably my favorite slate of the year. I think there's obviously a lot of high total games and some really strong options across the board for cash and tournaments. So I'm looking forward to it.
For sure, dude. Hodge, man, you ready for this one?
Yep, forward thinking, man. Week 7's long gone, and I'd like to keep it that way. So,
yeah, I think week 7 was probably my worst. Pete, I think it was your most tilting, and let's move on.
Yeah, let's move on to week 8 for sure.
So let's start with the first game on the DK slate, Denver at Kansas City. I think this is an interesting one because I know, Peter, I've heard you talk about it on a few pods, and I know I've been paying attention to it. Right off the bat, like as soon as this game opened, it was just getting slammed on the under. This is the second of a divisional game. This is, the only team that has seen Mahomes, this will be the third time they see him. Do you have any faith in your Broncos in the sense of keeping this close? And what are you thinking on like the fact that people are taking the under?
I think it makes sense to take the under, given that it's a second game within the division. The majority of Andy Reid's games have gone under in Arrowhead, which I think has a lot to do with just teams struggling to play efficiently on offense in Arrowhead, tough place to play. And, Kansas City, obviously they're the best offense in football, but it's a high number right now. I still think they'll be efficient. I still think they win this game pretty easily. 10 points is a lot. If you can grab a 10, I don't mind Denver there. It seems pretty efficient. But, yeah, from a fantasy perspective, you kind of have to pick and choose your spots here. It's amazing how expensive some of these Kansas City guys are.
Yeah, I feel like I can't play them outside of Hunt. I don't know. Hodge, are you heavy on – I feel like the Kansas City passing attack is going to be more popular than I like them.
yeah, I think I like the Denver side of the ball in regards to getting somebody like Sanders or Sutton at a much cheaper price than you're going to look at Tyreek. The one guy who I think is, I don't know, viable might be, I don't know, he's thin, but I think he's viable. I just think Watkins is seeing a decent enough targets at his price tag and running enough routes and playing enough snaps to where on a week like this week, if you're still trying to do like Gurley, Mixon, something like that, or if you're trying to do like the 3 running backs, like a Mixon, Connor, and Hunt, then Watkins is kind of one of those guys where you're forced into, but I don't know, maybe he's the Jermaine curse of this week.
Dude, he's getting so popular. I hate popular Watkins.
It's a price thing. It's 100% a price thing and a high over under in a game where people are expecting a ton of plays. So like, cool, $4,900 wide receiver in a game at 53.5 or whatever it's currently sitting at is what it is. And like, Pete probably made an insanely sharp move last week on fading a guy who was looking at 55% owned in Jermaine Kearse and a lot of high stakes stuff. And I think there's a definitely leverage to be had here with Watkins, but in cash, there's definitely something to be said about using a guy in this total.
Pete, you on the Watkins train? He's a guy I just never play.
Yeah, I'll have him in game stacks, and that's about it. I like Courtland Sutton the most. I probably won't play him in cash either, but I love him in tournaments. I've been a Courtland Sutton truther the whole way. You guys know about the preseason. I just think he's uber talented. Outside of Kenny Golladay, probably been the most unlucky receiver in terms of plays called back. He had an insane touchdown where I think he was in bounds, actually, but it got called back because on the field they called it out of bounds. He's just a total stud, deep ball threat. The concern is the volume, but he's 3,800, so I think I prefer him over Watkins. What do you guys think about the Tyreek home road splits? I mean, it's kind of just ridiculous. Doesn't really make sense. Easy to buy home road splits when their players doing a lot better at home, but Tyreek just has gone ham on the road, and I guess a lot of that has to do with teams keeping it closer with Kansas City when they're at home.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that we hear like Andy Reid is historically like scoring, not necessarily scoring less points at home, but keeping games, lower totals at home. So, I mean, it could have to do with Andy Reid play calling with like the home and road splits, since, Reid himself has these home and road splits. But it's an interesting one. I mean, Tyreek finally got in the end zone at home last week, but he still didn't have like a smash game. We look at the games that he has these huge target totals in the last 4 weeks, and it's, at the Broncos, at the Patriots, and then 7 and 10 at home. I think he's too expensive. I can't pay wide receiver 1 price for Tyreek Hill. I feel like I'm being Adam Levitan, but I just can't do it.
No, I think that's very sharp. I think Kelsey's interesting if you're going to pay up a tight end. There's a lot of really good cheap options, but Kelsey makes a lot of sense. The Broncos don't really have anyone who can cover him. Only thing they can do is try to bracket him, double team him, which is going to leave everyone else open. Hunt's success, I think, opens things up more for Kelsey too, especially in play action. So I like Kelsey. We'll see if the Broncos end up getting rid of Demaryius Thomas. I mean, they've been trying forever. They were trying to trade him to the Patriots before the season started. So
yeah, it'll be interesting if he gets a little extra looks this week. He's like that guy that you can make sense in game stacks. I mean, he's cheap enough, but people don't realize that Kansas City has actually been good against wide receivers. It's a sort of a weird thing that their defense is starting to play a little better. And I think it's not really a great spot for Keenum chasing against them at home.
Kansas City's just tough to play in. That's just the reality. Arrowhead's a really tough stadium. So Sutton's really the only guy for me because he's just a pure punt. I don't mind Sanders in game stacks either, but there's a lot of receivers I like for more. I have incentive on Sanders anyway, so I'll be good to go there.
And I guess the last guy's Lindsey. Hodge, what do you think about Lindsey?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so I definitely like Lindsey at his price tag. I have an interesting prop for you guys. Over under 55% snaps played for Lindsey this week.
Ooh. That's probably a good line.
That's a good line. They still trust Booker in pass protection. So
right,
if they get down in a big way, I think we'll see a lot of Booker. But early we should see a lot of Lindsey.
Yeah, that's my concern with him. I think he's thin if you're playing him in cash for sure. But there's a lot to love about Lindsey this week.
I think he's the goal line back. I think that's one thing that he does have going for him, is I think he would get the goal line touches over Booker. They definitely trust him as a runner more than Booker. But if they're down by 14, Lindsey's out of the game.
Yeah, and Lindsey's 100 cheaper than Kerryon Johnson, who's like a far superior play in my opinion.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Once they ruled out Theo, he definitely became the better play. All right, let's move on to the next one. Next game we have Cleveland at Pittsburgh. I think I'm just mostly off of Cleveland in this game. The line is moving towards Pittsburgh, which I think is correct. Ever since Pittsburgh got Hayden on the field, starting to do shadow coverage, they've been able to do a lot more with their blitz schemes, and they've been playing a lot better on defense. And the funny thing about Baker, I was talking to Joe Holker the other day, is that by PFF scores, the O-line is playing like okay, above average, but Baker is still just taking brutal sacks. He's just not playing well. And I think Pittsburgh defense is going to be uber chalk this week, and I think it's the correct play. I think the pricing is bad on DK. Hodge, I'll kick it to you first. Is there anyone on the Cleveland side that you're interested in?
I'm slightly interested in going back to Chubb in a game stack only. I think with the price increase on him, people will move away from his theoretical free square that he was last week at that price point, and getting $1,000 price bump is something where I think you could definitely get a running back like him low owned. But it's game stack only for me with really any of these guys.
Yeah, I actually love a play on Cleveland this week. I'm super high on Duke Johnson for tournaments. I get the Chubb play, but and I know Duke Johnson's volume's been pitiful, and it's been a pain in the ass if you've been rostering him at all. But I expect the Steelers to just run away with this game. I've built some teams that are just massive Steeler stacks. Defense, Big Ben. I like AB. I like Juju. Obviously, I love Connor. Love McDonald. Basically, all the Steelers are in play for me. So if you're going to run it back at all, I think Duke Johnson makes a lot of sense. There's no chance I go him in cash, but he's in consideration on like a main leagues team or something along those lines. I mean, he's really cheap and he's a perfect DK kind of back, and you can never believe anything Hugh Jackson says, but I have to imagine they're going to scheme to get him the ball a little bit more, especially if they're down.
That's the thing I wonder about is Hugh has made these like veiled comments about like things that need to change on offense, and I wonder if Hugh is even talking about Duke, because it seems like Todd Haley is the one who just doesn't want to use him.
Makes no sense. I don't get it. I just don't get why they don't use him more. He's such a good back in the passing game.
Yeah, and I mean, Hugh used him, so it's definitely possible that this is like Hugh saying, I want to use Duke, and this is how I'm going to get involved. But, I mean, it's tough. Like you said, it's tough to trust Hugh. He's such a dog. One thing on Vance, though, that's I think we should take into account is that if Pittsburgh does roll in those games that they roll, like when they rolled Atlanta, he barely played. They don't really use him in like their big run blocking tight end sets. He only played 37 snaps against the Falcons, and he didn't run a ton of routes. So I don't know if that concerns you guys.
Yeah, I think it concerns for sure, but he's cheap. I mean, I prefer the other options. I think he's my least favorite of the Steelers, but he's cheap. There's certainly other tight ends I prefer more. Hodge, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting week to get up to tight end, to get up to somebody like Kelsey or Jared Cook. So it's for roster construction purposes alone, paying up a tight end is a really fun way to go about it this week.
Yeah, and I think if I'm playing a pass catcher on Cleveland, it's Njoku, and I think he's a nice way to sort of bring it back from if you play Connor and Pitt D and you want to use Njoku, because that's their big leak since they lost Shazier.
Yeah, and Mayfield clearly looks for Njoku a lot, especially in the red zone.
Oh yeah, loves him. AB, I think AB is a guy I'm not quite as high on, just for the fact that they're probably going to have Ward shadow him. I think he can beat Ward. Obviously, this is a rookie cornerback, but I do think it opens things up for Juju. But the reality is I think Connor is like a smash play this week, and he's my preferred running back over Kareem Hunt if I had to pick between them.
I agree with that. I'm higher on AB than you are, though. I mean, Big Ben splits at home.
Yeah.
Brown off a bye. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, and
all of them are good plays. Juju, AB, Connor, Big Ben are all good plays. I guess the question is, who do you guys prefer in the low 6K range at quarterback? Is Big Ben near the top for you, or are you going to go Connor and get exposure to someone like Goff, or go to Winston, or up to Aaron Rodgers? How are you guys handling quarterback?
It's Winston for me right now.
For me, it's Rodgers, Winston, and then Big Ben. And then Goff is my fourth. But we'll definitely get to the Rodgers. I've had a lot of Rodgers discussions with Scott this week, and that's something that I definitely want to hear what you guys have to say. But I just for me, like, I love Big Ben at home. I just wish they were playing a slightly better offense, because the Browns have just been so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think if AB ends up being like really low owned because of Ward, then he's a great play. He's definitely a better play than Tyreek.
He's going to be low owned because of roster construction. That's my
yeah. Price will suppress his ownership, and the whole thing with the matchup here, even if you look back at some of the Fantasy Lab trends, you'll notice that there's a very, very good plus minus for him. I think he's like plus minus with a +8 or something in matchups that rate like top 10 for defensive opponents. So the whole Big Ben and AB thing, it's just a smash spot regardless of their opponent and the corners that he's facing, especially at home. So, and
Scott has done studies, and it's Beckham and Brown who are the two that are just not sensitive to CB matchup at all.
Correct.
All right, so let's move on to the next one. Washington and the Giants, a game that I have very little interest in. Honestly, there's just not really anyone in this game that I really love at all. Although the Redskins may be without the corner who has been playing the best for them this year. And I don't know, is there anybody that you guys really like in this game? And this is a game that I've kind of just sort of X'd out on my list. Pete, I'll kick it to you first.
two guys I think we should talk about. I think Jordan Reed is at least worth talking about. His volume's been pitiful. Somehow he's healthy and not getting opportunity relative to what we expected, which is shocking to me considering all the injuries. But I at least think he's worth talking about for tournaments. And then Odell Beckham, what is he, 7,500 on DraftKings?
Yeah.
Another guy we have to talk about. I haven't targeted this game at all, given we have 5 games with totals over 50, but I think those two guys are worth considering in tournaments.
Yeah.
Yes. So I agree there, and I think the best part about this game is the one-offs that you typically filter in with your other game stacks, right? So if you do end up with some cheaper pieces from some of the other game stacks, getting a guy like Odell Beckham in there and then Reed on the other side is a very, very easy way to just get one-offs with your 4 and 5 man game stacks from other games.
Yeah, and I think the thing that's even the best thing for Beckham. So like I was mentioning, I was having a brain fart there, but Quentin Dunbar is it sounds like he's more doubtful, and that's really been the strength of the Redskins defense, is that you had Dunbar and Norman on the outside, and they have just played like really, really strong perimeter corner play. And the drop off from Dunbar to Fabian Moreau is huge. So that's going to be a liability on that side of the field, and we know that Norman is not going to shadow Beckham. So at least on half of his routes, he'll have a positive matchup.
Well, and you just said it too. He's matchup proof, right? The studies that have been done. So
although the one guy who's been an issue for him has been Norman.
But it won't matter because Norman hasn't shot.
They're gonna play so much zone.
18 games, yeah.
Just throw some quick slants to the guy. I mean,
right.
The Giants. I mean, it's just been ridiculous what they're doing.
But they're a team though that we saw give up really early last year, and there's a solid chance they're giving up again this year.
Yeah, trading Shaq Harrison, Snacks Harrison's.
Yeah,
pretty big sign. Eli Apple.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah, it's just a mess, and it makes it hard to use. Like I want to use Barkley just on especially on FanDuel, the big discount you get going from Gurley down to Barkley, but it's tough to use the Giants right now, especially in a gross divisional matchup. Although I think Adrian Peterson's a little bit interesting if you want to have some tournament exposure, seeing as they did get rid of Snacks, and he was their big run stopper. Outside that, meh.
Agreed. Next game.
Seattle at Detroit. This is a game that I have seen some people mention that this game could shoot out. I think that is pretty unlikely. These are two teams that want to run the ball on their opponent. We've seen the total dropping, and Detroit is running the ball better than anyone in the league right now. Their offensive line is playing really, really well. Kerryon Johnson's playing at a super high level. And with Theo out, I think, like we were talking about earlier, I do think he is a better play than Phillip Lindsay. We know he's going to get passing work. And, he did get one goal line carry, although you know that the possibility of him losing a goal line touchdown to Blount is very real. But I think his work inside the 20s is really, really strong. And then, a goal line carry or two is a plus. You guys, how do you guys feel about Hodge? I'll kick it to you first. How do you feel about Kerryon, and what do you think about this game as a whole? I think it's a little slower than some people are thinking.
Yeah, and the reason that I can confirm that it's a little slower than some people were thinking, this is the first game that I thought was going to be a good game to stack. So my initial gut is obviously bad chalk, and taking a look at it a little later in this week, to what Peter said earlier, I think that Kerryon is $100 more than Lindsay and is a far superior play, just from an ownership standpoint too. And then you mentioned about Detroit's line being fantastic. They rank 6th in, or maybe 8th or something like that, 6th or 8th in pass protection, just giving Matt Stafford tons of time to go through his reads. So one of my favorite things to do is to go right back to Golden Tate. I thought he was in an elite spot last week, and I think he's in a really good spot again this week.
Revenge for Golden Tate.
Yeah.
I like Kerryon Johnson. I still love Kenny Golladay just from a talent perspective. He's been by far the unluckiest receiver. 3 touchdowns overturned by penalty. A couple of them were just total garbage. The concern, I think Matthew Stafford had 22 pass attempts last week, which is really, really troublesome. And you have Marvin Jones, Tate, and you have Galladay, so that's concerning. And like you referenced, the offensive line's playing really well. Evan Silva referenced it too on his podcast. They think they've taken the jump from kind of a second tier, good offensive line to a great offensive line, and that's evident in how they're playing. Seattle, we'll see. They definitely want to run the ball too, but I guess this Snacks Harrison thing could be a real factor too. If he gets in there, he's been one of the best run-stopping guys for a while. So we'll see if that plays into this game.
Yeah, and I wonder how much he's going to play.
20 snaps. That's my guess. That's the line. 19 and a half snaps. That's right.
Last I saw, one of the beats said, I was trying to find the tweet. Here it is. That they said they're going through the process of getting him up to speed and hopefully ready to play, but they would not guarantee that he would play against Seattle. So I think if he's inactive, Chris Carson is a little bit interesting, but it's still, I mean, they want to run the ball, and Carson's obviously the lead back. But we saw, against the Raiders, even as the lead back, he got 14 carries, no targets, 27 snaps. So, how much of a lead back you are in Seattle is just not all that valuable. So it's just tough to get behind the pass catchers on either team because we know the pass volume should be so limited. Either of you guys on Doug Baldwin? I think he's okay, not great.
Just like what Pete said with Stafford is the amount of attempts that you're seeing. It's the same thing with Russell Wilson too. So dating back or going back 5 or 6 games, he had a good amount of attempts, 36, 33. But since then, it's 26, 26, 21, 23. It's just been so much run for these guys. And if you go look at pace of play stats, and if you go look at the last 3 weeks on how many plays these teams are running, it's just, I don't know, man. Not enough here for me to want pieces.
Yeah. If you look at the home and away run split or play splits for these two, they would come in, I think, the 9th fastest pace on this slate, which is just not something to be stoked about. But I think it's positive for someone like Kerryon because we know that the game script should be staying more neutral than someone like Philip Lindsay, who could be way down and get scripted out. One guy that I want to talk about, if Nick Vannett is out on Sunday, then Ed Dickson will be their only tight end left. He was paid to be a starter. He's getting paid $4 million a year. He says he's super healthy, says he should never even have been put on IR. He's, super athletic dude, and we know the matchup is good. He smashed the Lions last year in a similar spot like this on 5 targets for 175 yards, and everyone chased it the rest of the year. So if you want a $2,500 bare minimum tight end in a tournament, if Nick Vannett doesn't play, Dixon's there, but I think Nick Vannett might play. Next game, Tampa Bay at Cincinnati. I think this is another good one. Although I think Cincinnati is getting a little more love than I want to give them. Since Mixon has been the starting running back, they have been a much slower team. They want to run the ball. They passed at a 70% clip while they had Gio, and it's 55, 60% with Mixon as the starter. Do love Jameis. Hodge, I'll kick it to you first. Is there anyone on the Cincy side that you're really interested in? I like Uzoma and Boyd, but I don't really love the Cincy side. I think Dalton's going to be a little more popular than I want him on my lineups.
I like this entire game. You have an over-under 54.5, and I think everyone in Cincy's in play, especially coming off an embarrassing loss on primetime football. They're due for that bounce back narrative, right? I think Joe Mixon is fantastic. Tampa Bay's 31st in rush DVOA and 32nd in pass DVOA. So Joe Mixon looks like he's in a really, really good spot. Seeing the volume that you want for $7,300, he's the only goal line back, and I think AJ Green is also in a fantastic spot. His A dot is through the roof. His market share of air yards is elite, and same thing with his market share of targets. So the Boyd thing though, to me, look at his market share of targets over the past 3 weeks too. And now John Ross is John Ross is not back. That's correct. He's been ruled out, maybe. Yeah, he's been ruled out with his growing. So that I think that helps Boyd a little bit, but still, it's the AJ Green show. So if I'm stacking this game, it's Dalton, Mixon, Green for me, and then I'll work around that.
Yeah, I like this game. It sounds like a little more than you do, Proctor. Total's gone up a point from 53.5 to 54.5. I think AJ Green's a phenomenal play, like you just mentioned, Hodge. Love Mixon. In Tampa Bay is just, I mean, they're probably worse than Atlanta. Atlanta's getting killed by running backs, but now Quan Alexander tore his ACL as well. Jameis literally is throwing nonstop, which is great for the opposing offense. So I'm on the Bengals. I do have concerns. I mean, when we came into this season, I was really optimistic about this team, and they've had big losses. I mean, first of all, Eifert definitely impacts them in a really big way. Gio not being on the field is impactful for pace, but this is just a dream spot against a really, really bad defense and an opposing offense that throws a ton. So I'm on the Bengals. I'm on Tampa Bay. I think Mike Evans can have a huge game here. Howard's probably one of my favorite tournament tight ends on the entire board. He's a freak athlete, great matchup. Really the only concern, I guess, is the front four for Cincinnati. But outside of that, the defense just isn't playing that well. So I think this game can really, really shoot out, and that's good news for pretty much all the options. I think AJ Green and Howard are my favorite tournament plays, and then Mixon I'm really considering heavily using in cash across the industry.
Yeah, and it's not that I don't like this game so much as that I start to worry about the Bengals. Like, I just feel like they're starting to fall apart a little bit. And I do think the one thing that's really interesting about the Bucs is that they're giving up a shit ton of points to wide receivers, but like 80% of it's going to slot wide receivers. They've been solid on the perimeter. They're by far the worst defense against slot wide receivers. I think they give up 38 PPR points a week in the slot, which is like 10 PPR points more than any other team in the league. So I think this is a bounce back spot for Boyd. But I do think there is some concern, like Hodge mentioned, that the last 2 or 3 weeks, Dalton has sort of gone back to peppering AJ Green. I do also think this is a really good spot for CJ Uzomah. Outside of Pittsburgh, Tampa Bay is like the worst team against the tight end. It's just the middle of the field that they're really getting smashed in, especially losing another linebacker. I think it's a nice spot for Uzomah, especially if you want to play a naked Jameis and bring him back with a cheap player.
Gerald McCoy being out for them is just it's a nail in the coffin for me. So he's their emotional leader. He's their best player on defense. He's out. They've had a bunch of injuries. Alexander's not like an amazing player, but he was a guy there, and now they're putting in someone worse behind him. So it's just like I want exposure to this game. I think there's one game we'll get to that has potential for way more points, but this is right there as a top shootout potential for me.
Yeah. Also, Proctor, what do you talk like? I gotta make sure that I'm not off here when you saying that the Bengals look like they're going to shit. I mean, they've scored 21 points or more in every single contest except for their most recent one. So and they've had multiple games above 30 in the past like 4 weeks too, if I remember correctly. So talk to me about that a little bit.
So against the Dolphins, the Bengals had 2 defensive touchdowns. So, like, if you peel those off the board, they didn't do shit. Dalton has scored 14, 17, and 9 DK points over his last 3. And that's coming against, the Dolphins, who are not any good, and the Chiefs, who, they were massively trailing against. And then he, sort of as expected, was garbage against Pittsburgh. But Dalton hasn't been great the last 3 weeks. And, it comes with them losing guys. I think Gio is was an important piece of the offense, and I think John Ross was important too, even though he didn't play a ton of snaps.
Stretch the field.
Okay. Well, no, and that's why I like to have these conversations. So I feel like a game stack here is clearly Mixon Green and then Winston, Godwin or something like that.
Right. Yeah. I think Winston is a far, far, far superior play to Andy Dalton.
Agreed. And he's cheaper. Yeah, for sure. Word. All right.
Yeah, Winston over Dalton, like hands down. I wasn't trying to say that. I just think I think this is a get right spot for the Dolphins or for the Bengals. I agree with you. The Eifert thing and the Ross thing are a big deal. In addition to Giovanni Bernard, so it's not the same offense. Levitan's talked about that a lot, but I just think that this Tampa Bay defense is going to get exposed pretty much every single week.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They suck. It's just like one of those, like, we have two mistake-prone quarterbacks against each other, so this could end up being like a weird game. That's like my only back of my head thought.
That's probably the total too. You could see defensive touchdowns. You could see a bunch of weird stuff, but yeah, 54.5 points. Total's going up. I'm gonna follow that.
Yeah. So next game we have New York Jets at Chicago. This is a pretty gross game. Curse was a guy who burned everyone last week, and now we have Robbie Anderson is going to miss this game, and Curse draws another strong matchup against the slot coverage in Chicago, who the Fangio defense sort of sells out against the deep wide receiver one, and they are happy to give it up underneath, which is where Curse would be, and apparently Darnold doesn't even know he exists. Pete, do you have any interest in going back to Curse?
Absolutely. I mean, this is the week to go to him. You get him at way lower ownership. People are going to be off him. So I love that call. I think last week there's a lot of reasons he could have failed. The wind certainly was a factor. We saw the total come down. Obviously, Curse is a short pass guy, but I think the impact was, when the field shrinks, it's easier to cover someone like him. So obviously it's just a bad game all around for the Jets, but this is a great spot to go back to him at low ownership. The Bears side is interesting to me. Everyone's going to be, or at least a lot of, box score chasers are going to be looking at Trubisky and some of these options. I'm probably staying away. Are you guys on the Bears at all here?
I don't want Trubisky when he's like not trailing.
Yeah.
Hodge?
I think I will once again have nothing to do with Trubisky. And if I lose money by not rostering Trubisky, then I guess it is what it is. But it's, how many times did he threw the ball close to 50 times last week, right? So like that is not going to happen. And I think he
completed 26 of 50 completed.
Yeah, it's nuts. He had the rushing touchdown. He had 6 rush attempts last week and 8 the week before, which is always great. If you're telling me that a quarterback is looking at 5 rushing attempts, and I think there's something to be said there. But Mitchell Trubisky is not a $5,300 quarterback. He's a $6,100 quarterback on DraftKings, and I'm not. There's so many other quarterbacks in that price point that I think that you are going to get a good ownership, because quarterback ownership is always spread across the board. You typically don't have to worry a whole ton about getting cute at quarterback. So I'm good. I'm good on the Trubisky fade again. The other thing with the Bears too, I think Khalil might actually miss on Sunday. I do like that. Nothing of that is official, but I do think that helps Crow a little bit if you're looking for a cheap running back.
I think Trenton Cannon is going to assume the Bilal Powell role. If you go back and look at the snaps, he played, I think, 40% of the snaps last week after Powell went out. So, I think Crowell's role stays about the same. And as a dog, he's not really a guy that I'm really all that interested in. I know the price is nice, like $3,700, and if you bump his carries a little bit and like a target or two, his projection is going to be nice, but just doesn't feel like a great play.
The matchup is trash as a road dog too. I'm just saying if Mac is out, it significantly helps Crowell, but like Nichols and Goldman are, I mean, there's a reason that they're like 5th in rush DVOA, right? All I'm saying is $3,700. One of the things that you typically cannot get now are these backup running backs priced this cheaply. And I think Crow is much more in line for like 17 total touches in this game.
Do you have any thought on Crow?
I have so much of him in best ball that
makes it easy to
I guess. Yeah, he was going low for a while there. I had a decent amount of him and Powell. Fuller was devastating for me last night there, but yeah, I think he's fine. I prefer a lot of these other guys that just set up better on DraftKings. I mean, I talked about Duke Johnson. I think Duke Johnson will have like 1/10 of the ownership that Crowell has. We'll get to this Colts Raiders game, which also has cheap running backs. We've talked about Kerryon Johnson, who's obviously more expensive, but I think that Crowell is just kind of like a marginal play. Maybe I'll have like one tournament share of him if I really need the savings, but yeah, I'm not too high on this game just in general. Yeah, I think Curse is probably the best play for tournaments just from a game theory perspective.
Yeah, and I think Herndon is a guy that he had a great game. People are going to look at him.
Yeah. He's a good pickup in Dynasty if you're doing that. I think he has potential long term, but I don't know about this week.
He ran like 12 or 15 routes, played like 20-some snaps. Yeah. It's tough to rely on that. And I just pulled it up. Trenton Cannon played 32% of the snaps. Powell played 20%. Crow played 46% last week. So, I don't think Crow is going to assume like a 70-30 role. I think he's still like a 50-60% snap back, which is it hurts. Chicago defense in tournaments?
Definitely. They're expensive, but definitely in play.
Yeah.
They should be low owned. These really expensive defenses are getting lower and lower owned. And it makes sense why. I mean, the difference between like the worst defense and the best defense is like the same difference between quarterbacks. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and they keep busting. Like early in the year, the expensive defenses were hitting like the first 3 weeks. And then once the Vikings blew it, everyone has sort of bailed on the expensive defenses. And the Jags last week blew it. Next game, Baltimore, Carolina. This is one where, like, we know that Baltimore is paced up. They're running at one of the highest paces in the league, especially on the road. Carolina is like a middle of the pack pace, so this game should have plays run, but there's just not anybody that I really, really love. I think Crabtree is probably my favorite play in this game, but I don't even love him all that much. Hodge, I'll kick it to you first. Is there anybody that you're really interested in? First on the Carolina side, there's no one that I really have fallen in love with.
Yeah, so this is a game that is totally off my radar, much like the Jets and Chicago game. I think CMC dipping to 7K for a guy who's running like 99% of his team's snaps is interesting, but Cam is cannibalizing him. Like it's actually happening. I can play 99% of the snaps, but he's getting no looks. It truly feels like Cam is ignoring him. I've seen him out in the flat and Cam not even go through his reads, which is totally anecdotal. But then if you go look at his market share targets, it adds up. So at 7K though, I think with the pace of this game, unfortunately, we're sitting at like a 44.5 or 44 over under as of recording this. So I don't know. Cam's interesting at 7K just because there's that whole core of running backs that everyone's going to be on. So it's an easy way to leverage at a similar price point.
I wish he was getting the volume again. I mean, what we heard this offseason, we all scoffed at that he was going to actually get the volume. Then he did get the volume. And we were all like, oh, Chris McCaffrey every single week. And now it's kind of back to where we were. Obviously, the game flow has been a lot different, especially last week. I mean, they go down 21-0. It makes sense. But this is just a tough spot against the Ravens. I do get the pace thing. My favorite play is probably Crabtree as well, but I want exposure to John Brown every single week in tournaments if I can. The guy is just ridiculous. I mean, happy he's finally feeling good because he is so talented. And in tournaments, I mean, John Brown is in play. I don't care who the opposing defense is. He's in play every week because he's probably right there with, Tyreek, I'm trying to think. There's a couple guys. I mean, Antonio Brown's still up there, but in terms of busting like a 70-yard touchdown, Will Fuller would have been up there too. Obviously, we saw that last night, but he's done now for the year. Those are kind of like the 4 or 5 guys that I'm wanting exposure to. So I don't hate him in tournaments. I think Crabtree's the probably highest equity play with his salary.
Yeah, and I think with I was talking to Scott earlier in the year. I was like, we're gonna have that game where Brown actually catches 6 or 7 balls, and we got it last week, and he scored 30 DraftKings points. So he can do that any week. My concern is that people will sort of chase that from last week, and it's not gonna hit every week. But he's getting the volume, and the volume is definitely there. And I think Bradbury will chase Crabtree around the field, and then we have a rookie on the other side that should follow John Brown. So a guy who's an elite deep threat is always a plus matchup against a rookie corner. Other than that, though, Greg Olsen is a little interesting in the fact that the Ravens have seemingly been most susceptible to tight end catches, but he looks terrible out there. He definitely looks like a guy who's playing with a foot injury. Do either of you have any interest in Greg Olsen?
Not with the other options on the slate.
Yeah. Funches too. I'll bring up just because I think he's starting to play well, but tough matchup. Michael Thomas I think can win against anyone. He made Jimmy Smith look somewhat bad, but I think the Ravens are going to be elite versus the pass. I hope Funches busts, and then we can get him at a cheaper salary and play him going forward. But if you want to be super contrarian and get a 1% owned guy, maybe he's the one.
Yeah. I think the Ravens defense is always in play, especially against mistake-prone Cam. Though he is playing better this year. All right, next game. Let's get to something a little more interesting. We have the Indy at Oakland. I think this is a really, really good game, especially for the Indianapolis side. There's lots of talk of this game shooting out, but I do think there's legitimate risk that Oakland is just going to lay down. This is a team where everyone's getting traded. We now see KO Kelechi Osemele is in a knee brace. He might not play. He's probably their best offensive lineman. You guys have any thoughts on the Oakland side? I'll kick it to you first, Hodge. Where you think things might change with Cooper gone? Well,
unfortunately, sore subject for Peters, everyone knows. But how? Actually, let me go bring this up so I have it right in front of me. Amari Cooper was garnering 14% of that team's total market share of targets. Him leaving is not vacating this insane amount of targets, right? So I think that we need to temper our expectations of all of a sudden Jared Cook and Jordy Nelson just getting an extra, it's not like 30% of market share of targets were vacated. So with that being said, though, it's the pace of this game. It's a 50.5 point over under. And I do think that Jalen Richard for $4,200 is well within the conversation in all formats. And I think Jared Cook is well within the conversation in all formats. I think Jordy Nelson, I'm not about Jordy Nelson this week at $4,700 on DraftKings, and Martavis Bryant at $3,700, I guess, just due to his air yards for this team. But for me, on core teams, it's Jalen Richard and it's Jared Cook.
Yeah, I like Jalen Richard the most on the Raiders. Bryant's a mental midget, but $3,700 is enticing for his talent. I think the big thing for the Raiders is the offensive line play has really fallen off. They've had injuries there, like Proctor mentioned, which impacts them in a big way. You guys know I'm an Amari truther. He does take a lot of attention. He gets the best cornerback, which is going to impact them in a negative way going forward. So there's a lot of factors here that make you bearish on the Raiders. The one positive thing, we know that the Colts are going to throw a shit ton. And the way they play is really good for opposing offenses. So maybe Derek Carr gets it going. He's really cheap. I definitely am not going to play Jordy Nelson, but that's just I don't play Jordy Nelson in general. I'm kind of biased towards dudes like him. But I I don't know. I think that the best play for sure on the Oakland side is Richard, then Cook, and then probably Martavis Bryant. I love the Colts. There's so many Colts. Well, there's not so many, but there's a couple Colts I think are just slam dunk, great tournament plays. But Proctor, your thoughts on the Raiders?
Yeah, I played Jordy against the Dolphins and the Browns, just sort of trying to capitalize on his slot snaps. But I think he's going to lose those slot snaps now that Seth Roberts should step in as the full-time slot wide receiver. Seth Roberts was kind of the guy who was like pushed off the field while Cooper was there, and the Raiders just like don't want to play him on the outside. And Jordy has been great in the slot, but just horrible as an outside wide receiver. And Gruden is such a donk that like he's not going to realize that, and he's just going to play Jordy on the outside, and he's not going to have success. So I think Jordy's going to be somewhat a bad chalk this week if people get on him. I think he's a 4,700 wide receiver. Like he's in that 4,500 range. That's going to be, I think, probably one of the more popular guys because people sort of see that Cooper left and they're going to think the targets go there. And I don't really think they are. If you really want to go bottom of the barrel, Seth Roberts is 3,400. He's going to play the slot. He's done okay the last 2 weeks. He had 7 and 6 targets. Maybe he gets 7 or 8 this week. And this is, Carr's not throwing the ball down the field. So guys like Roberts and Jared Cook are going to be the ones who soak up those targets. But it's just, it's hard to get behind a team that's possibly just tanking.
Jordy is going to be chalk this week too. He's 7th in wide receiver mentions over on Fantech. Like he will end up being chalk. And I think that's chalk that you do not have to eat and should not eat in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I think Crabtree's a better play. And we'll talk about another wide receiver in the 4K range that I like that I don't think anyone else is going to play. But, I think on the Indy side, I think, I wish this was indoors, but I think T.Y. Hilton is mispriced. 6,300 for a guy who's finally getting, red zone and inside the 10 targets from Luck. People are going to look at his 4 targets last week and think, he didn't have a great game. But the reality is that when they were running the ball in the second half, he wasn't playing. He played 35 of 66 snaps because they didn't need him on the field. And, he beat Trey White in the end zone twice for touchdowns. And that's a really tough matchup. Now he's going to go against Oakland. He's going to play against nobodies in the secondary. I think he's like probably the best play at 6K on the board.
Yeah,
you guys behind?
I totally agree. Sorry, I was just muted. I love T.Y. Hilton. I think he's by far the best play in this game. I think Andrew Luck's a really good pivot away. I think no one's talking about him either. He's a fantastic tournament play. We'll see what happens with Marlon Mack, too. I did practice in full today, I believe. If he plays, he's another guy that I was on him last week. I would definitely play him. If he doesn't play, fire up Naheem Hines. Wilkins is probably thin, but I love all these Colts. If this team, they know that they're in trouble. If they lay down, I could see the Colts putting up a lot of points. They play so fast that I think they can really, really go off here. The concern is that the Raiders don't put any points up themselves, but I think that this Colts team, just the way they play, is really good for fantasy. So love Hilton, love Luck, and then the running backs are in play. Ebron's in play. I just think this is an underrated spot that shouldn't garner that much ownership relative to these other spots.
Yeah, the worst part is that they're at 4 o'clock. So, hopefully we get a Schefter bomb on Marlon Mack. I think he's fine. It looks like it was a maintenance thing, but never know, especially with a guy with his injury history.
He struggles to stay healthy, but he's electric. And the thing that really drove me to Mac for best ball and just being bullish on him when he's healthy and playing, Andrew Luck was asked about the running game, and he's like, we desperately need Marlon Mack back. So they know it. Obviously, Irsay's a donkey, but he talked about him being a 1,500-yard guy. Within the organization, they are super high on him. And when he's healthy, he's explosive. He really is. So we'll see what transpires, but that's definitely an injury to watch.
Yeah, and on top of that, if he does miss, then Luck becomes like an elite pivot off of Aaron Rodgers. If you have Rodgers in your lineup and you're struggling and Mack gets ruled out, then Luck becomes an elite pivot because we know he's going to throw the ball more if Mack doesn't play. Next game we have San Francisco at Arizona. This is a really interesting one because Byron Leftwich will step in as the offensive coordinator. There's been plenty of discussions on the fact that he was an Arians disciple. I think it was more, not even so much that he was just a disciple. He was like really, really good friends with Bruce Arians. He said he's been in contact with him, this week. And I think at the very least, he's going to increase the pace that the Cardinals are going to play. They were playing at a historically low pace. They were basically going to end up bottom 10 in the NFL ever for total snaps run on offense, which is, just unheard of in today's NFL. So I think, he can't be much worse than Mike McCoy. Peter, are you interested in David Johnson this week and, a rebirth of the Cardinals offense?
I was hoping you guys can answer that question for me. I am interested. I want to play him. Just a gross spot. The one downside in this is San Francisco's been better against the run than they have against the pass. I think Christian Kirk is a really, really good tournament play. But, yeah, David Johnson's in that consideration in all formats. So you hope they start utilizing him in a different way, especially as a receiver. We'll see if that comes to fruition, though. I mean, I definitely want to have some exposure to him with tournaments. But, yeah, I think the one guy who I really, really like is a pivot. I think everyone's thinking about David Johnson, so his ownership should be somewhat high. But Christian Kirk, clear connection with Rosen, and that's how you really just torch this 49er defense is through the air.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and say it that I've been waiting till late in the week. I'm going to play Larry Fitzgerald.
Baby.
I don't think anyone else is going to play him. He's finally healthy, and it's something that just hasn't been talked about. He played 64 of 66 snaps last week. He's listed as probable this week. He's been questionable every other week. Leftwich has been vocal that, you need to get Larry Fitzgerald involved in the offense. And the 49ers have just been obliterated by slot wide receivers this year. If you go back and look at the guys they've played, they've just been smashed. Fitzgerald has 8 targets in back-to-back weeks where he's been healthier. And if we just boost their pace by like 20%, which isn't all that crazy as slow as they've played, then, you're probably looking at 10 targets for Fitzgerald against a team that's horrible against slot wide receivers.
It's the sharpest take of the podcast so far. I like that. I mean, I'm biased towards Fitzgerald. I go down and play a lot of golf in Arizona. He's a member at Whisper Rock. See him. He's a super nice guy, obviously a freak athlete in his prime. And it's been a bummer to watch him, and he's clearly been hurt. But, yeah, he's healthy, which all indications are that he is, given the snap counts like you just referenced. Just saw him practice in full on Thursday. Makes a lot of sense. I definitely like attacking San Francisco through the air. I still love Christian Kirk because I think there's a strong bond there, and he's an explosive athlete who has really high upside. But, yeah, maybe what about a double stack? Would you ever do that?
Yeah, I was just going to say I think Rosen's a little interesting too. Everyone wants to play Johnson. They want to get on the running game. But if, Rosen's getting the ball out fourth quickest of all quarterbacks right now. This is a San Francisco team that you can just smash through the air. If you really want to go on a flyer, play Rosen with Kirk and Fitzgerald. You could even play him with Kirk, Fitzgerald, and DJ if you think they really get it back together. But I think the one thing that really interests me for Fitzgerald is that there's only 2 players on this team on the the skill player side. Well, there's actually 3 that know the Bruce Arians offense, and that's David Johnson, Fitzgerald, and Ricky Seals-Jones. So I think these are 3 guys that should be the quickest to pick up the newly installed offense, whereas Kirk and Chad Williams, not so much involved in that offense previously. I do think Breida's going to play. He every week just fucking ruins whoever his backup's going to be because he sits out all week and then plays on Sunday, and then he hurts himself 10 snaps into the game and then he leaves. So you can't play him. Garcon sounds like he will be out. If Peterson does shadow, since this team is trying to take the leap, if they finally start shadowing Peterson, who is unhappy, I think part of the reason he's unhappy is they're not letting him shadow. That's what he wants to do. Pettis could have some appeal.
Kittle.
Right, and Kittle. So you look at Pettis and Kittle as the two guys that are going to avoid Peterson if they do let him shadow Marquise, who he's been really, really good at covering.
Goodwin's been my most tilting player all season by like a large margin. Needed him week 1, gets hurt. Baiting him massively on that Monday night game. Had some nice 10K 3-mans where I was commanding favorite. Of course, Goodwin goes nuts, and then needed him last week and shits the bed. So it's nice being on the opposite side with Goodwin, but it is what it is.
Yeah, dude. That week that Goodwin came back for like his first game, I was like all in.
I love him. I think I have him like 28% in best ball, but yeah.
I mean, I was just clicking the button on him and Garcon all through best ball. Like, give me Shanahan's X wide receiver.
Sure,
but yeah, both just
Garoppolo shares. Yeah, a lot of my Goodwin teams are just dust now, so it is what it is.
Yeah. Tons of Breida look good. He's dead too. The team is just falling apart, which is why I think this really is a get right spot for Arizona. And I think, cheaper exposure to like RSJ or Fitz or Kirk, makes some sense. Whereas, you're paying a bit of a premium for Johnson on DK and on FanDuel. I think he makes a lot more sense on DK, as this should be a spot where he catches a bunch of balls versus having a ton of rushing success. Hodge, man, we sort of left you out. What do you think about this one?
You guys drove it home. There's not a whole lot else to say other than maybe Raheem Mostert, if there really is no Breida. He logged like 40% snaps the last 2 weeks, and could definitely be a viable option at $3,800, but it's all that all hinges on Breida. So.
And did you just put Fitzgerald in your cash game team after that great sell by Proctor?
Yeah, I did a global swap. Actually, it was everywhere.
He's been in mine all week.
I'm like overly sold now. Yeah, we'll see what happens. I think that's so sharp.
I'm definitely. By the way, I'm going to edit that part out of the pod that's going to go on iTunes.
He's going to have no ownership, and then we all just go nuts about him. That's a sharp take. I mean, 10 targets is very realistic.
Uh-huh.
Yep. And then the most important game on the slate that like you legitimately have to get right, or your lineups are fucking dead when this slate ends, is Green Bay at the Rams. I think Rodgers is the quarterback that I am trying my best to get in cash. If I have to go down to Winston, if I really feel like I have the nuts, and I don't have the 300 to get there, or 400 to get there, I'm okay with that. But Rodgers is just like, he's lighting it up the last 2 weeks. He looks healthier. So there's a chance he may shed the knee brace. He gets Cobb and Allison back. I'm not necessarily sure that Cobb is a good thing. I do think Allison is helpful to the offense. Back-to-back 400-yard games. So Rams defense you can definitely throw on. I have a hard time not using Rodgers as my cash game quarterback. What do you guys think about Rodgers and this game? Hodge, since I sort of ignored you on the San Fran game, I'm going to kick it to you.
Yeah, Devontae Adams is $7,900, my number one wide receiver on this slate. I want to attack every aspect of this game, and I think if you're paying up for a wide receiver, it's Devontae Adams. Market share, targets, air yards, you name it, red zone, looks inside the 10 too. It's not just the 20. Guy gets an exuberant amount of targets inside the 10. Once again, do not care about Marcus Peters. I love attacking Marcus Peters. He's not what he used to be. And Aaron Rodgers at $6,400, I think with this Larry Fitzgerald discussion that we just had might be viable for me now. It definitely moves some pieces around. And this is the game that I want. I want so much of this game. In cash, I think that there's definitely aspects to get more on like that Oakland Indy game, to get more on this Cincy Tampa Bay game, and maybe just use one-offs from this rather than 4 and 5 man game stacks. But it's hard to get away from a 56.5 point over under from teams playing at an extremely high pace of play.
Yeah, dude, this game, like, how does this game fail? Right?
I don't see how it fails.
Because football.
You guys sound like you're a little lower on Goff than I am. mean, Goff, you look at the game log, obviously it doesn't look as pretty, but in close games, Smith gave a stat on the DFS Edge pod, and I was looking at some other stuff. I don't want to butcher it exactly, but essentially in close games, Goff's averaging close to 400 yards passing per game.
Well,
obviously it's different without Kupp, but
that Minnesota game immediately comes to mind when you're looking at two teams putting up 30 points. You're going to see volume, and then the correlation between the two, right? Like it's unreal. So I think Goff is in a really, really good spot too, especially being at home. And
that Chargers game was a little closer. He goes for 30 fantasy points, puts up 354 yards. Before that against Arizona, I mean, they smashed him, but he still went for over 300 yards. Minnesota game, it was close. Guy goes for 465 yards. Obviously, it's a full complement of weapons, but I think he's a really, really good play. I think I prefer Rodgers though. That's been a tougher call for me. I think I'm definitely going Rodgers though, given that he's saying he's feeling healthy, and you get the best quarterback in the league still. I know Mahomes is playing unreal, but game tomorrow, I think this is a real life question. What do you guys do? I think I still take Aaron Rodgers over Mahomes at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing too, is it's like this is a better spot for Rodgers than Mahomes. You know, Mahomes is a 10-point home favorite with a running game that's really starting to click. Yeah. Whereas Rodgers, they still don't have a run game figured out. The Rams are going to score points on them. Broncos, you have no idea if they're going to score points on the Chiefs. Sorry, Pete.
No. My question was real life. Let's say you had a franchise. You just have a random average team, right?
Oh, yeah.
And you get it's nothing to do with fantasy, the matchups this week. I'm still taking Rodgers. So you think about that, and it's like, okay, I can get arguably, I think it's very clear that he's the best quarterback in the league at 6,400. I get that.
Right.
He's who I have in cash right now, but I don't know.
I think it's a question of, do I get Mahomes and Reed, or do I just get Mahomes?
I love Mahomes. I mean, for the next 5 years, I'll take Mahomes over Rodgers, but tomorrow, I think I still got to give it to Rodgers.
Right. Yeah, but to Proctor's point is that McCarthy's still like this goes to like exactly right. And so you take players on teams who have good coaches who typically we expect to coach appropriately, and that's how this game doesn't get there is because of Mike McCarthy. But Sean McVay on the other end of that is why I think like playing Gurley and Goff together might be where I end up too, because you are truly netting every single touchdown, and you are legitimately looking at 5 of them in this game. So.
But for me, I prefer the upside of playing Rodgers and bringing it back with Goff, because or not with Goff, with Gurley.
Like, how do you do that?
Rodgers Goff,
the new gunslinger format. You have to play both of those two. But no. So if Gurley does get those 2 or 3 rushing touchdowns, then having Gurley and Rodgers, you just automatically have the best pieces of that. And I think there is some question as to how the wide receivers will be deployed this week, with Cobb and Allison coming back. And, MVS has been playing so well the last few weeks. There's a question of, is Cobb going to assume the every down role again, or, will he split some time with MVS, who's been much better downfield threat than Cobb probably has ever been. So there's some safety to taking Rodgers versus, if I play Goff and Gurley and try to bring it back with one of their wide receivers and I pick the wrong one, then I'm just dead.
Yeah, and we were talking about this, I think, on Wednesday before a lot of practice and stuff came out, when I was starting to build stacks, and I was just kept plugging in MSV. And I think, like I was saying on Wednesday, I think I keep him in there regardless of the news, in stacks only, in game stacks only, because news should only suppress his ownership. But if he's still going to run a decent amount of routes, even if his snaps are down, I'm okay with that in game stacks. So I'm excited about this offense. And who doesn't like a good late slate hammer? Let's be real.
Yeah. All right. Here's the real question, boys. Gurley and cash on FanDuel.
No.
11 whatever. It's so hard to get to.
11K flat.
Yeah.
I'm not playing him on FanDuel.
I'm going to be able to get to him, I think, on Thursday slate, because I played Fuller, Watson, and I actually plugged in Jakeem Grant, which doesn't feel good now. But I made a team that I loved with Gurley, and now I don't know. We'll see. On the main slate, I have 0% chance of him playing.
Yeah,
or not 0, but like 5%.
He's a great tournament play on FanDuel because most of the projections think that he'll be higher owned, but I don't think it's going to happen because I don't think you can feasibly get there. It's hard. I mean, is he really $3,000 better than, especially on FanDuel where it's kind of like a sliding scale of value? Is he really $3,000 better than Connor and Hunt? And I don't think he is, right?
He might be, dude. Look at his game log. I mean, he's getting better usage than any. It's like going back to like 2006 LaDainian Tomlinson. Yeah. And they're so efficient. McVay's a genius. He has every. When you get down to the red zone, it's just incredible.
But you also, you look at his logs on FanDuel, and it's like 22, 31, 22, 23, 31, 35, 28. So, he's not scoring 40 on FanDuel like he can on DraftKings.
Yeah, but his worst game was what, like 22?
Right. There is value in safety.
That was.
Yeah, I think in other weeks he'd be more enticing to play if this was one of the games and there wasn't so much fantasy goodness across the board. That's been my argument against him all week because I think there's some sharp people I've talked to are saying I'm still jamming him in just because he has the highest floor and he's the highest upside, and I can make it work. Which to me, I don't see the value on FanDuel at this point. But
it's got to be the touchdown equity value on FanDuel. Right? Like it has to be that. It's the only reason.
I think people overweight that a little bit on FanDuel. It is still half PPR. So there is value in like catching the ball and getting yardage. Even without the 3-point bonus. People overweight the touchdown value a little bit.
Yeah. Well, he's going to be like 90% owned again on DraftKings, which is going to be annoying. Not really that high, but like a lot of double ups last week. Like, the $1,000 double up, she was 100.
Yeah, that's why I stopped playing that with you maniacs.
We'll see. I don't know. I don't know. I think he's an easy fade on FanDuel, but I think a lot of people are going to do that. So then you have the tournament option, like you mentioned.
Yeah, especially because I think like some of the cheaper running back plays, have a lot of PPR value on DK that they don't have on FanDuel, like Jalen Richard, Getting 7 catches doesn't really do you a whole lot. His Richard's FanDuel points are like abysmal when you look at them.
Oh yeah. I got one other crazy play for you guys in this game that burned me bad last week from something I read, and we'll see what happens. But there was a lot of speculation that Gerald Everett was going to run some of the, get more opportunity. I think he played 22 or 23 snaps last week, so very disappointing. But he's another min-price tight end if you want to take that route. A lot of people are speculating he would take over and get more opportunity given that Kupp was out, and they just don't seem to want to target Reynolds. But 2 targets, 22 of 61 snaps, probably tough to go back, but 2,600 is nice. You guys have any interest in that?
The problem is that Higbee still seems to be playing more snaps like every week.
Yeah.
Higbee dominates the snaps. Even though
he's 2,600 too, so I guess that's the question. Do you have any interest in Higbee? You got 1 target.
Right. You look at last night. Jordan Akins was supposed to be the pass catching tight end, and he does nothing. And I don't even remember the other dude's name. Jordan Thomas is their run blocking tight end, and he scores 2 touchdowns. So it's hard for a tight end who's not on the field. Though Herndon showed us last week you don't always have to be on the field, but it just makes it tough.
What about that Detroit tight end? 2 touchdowns and 12 routes run or something?
Yep.
Right.
That's how volatile that position is, though, and that's why I think there's something to be said about Uzma and McDonald at that 3,500, 3K or 3,700 range.
Throw in Howard in that mix too. I fucking love Howard this week.
Yeah. One problem is like playing a Rams tight end hoping for a touchdown when they're like giving the ball to Gurley every time they get to the 3.
Right.
Hurts.
It hurts so bad. I think it's really thin. I think the Dixon call is better, and I think with ownership, he's going to be so low because he still has that O next to his name for anyone building lineups now. Obviously, Vanette's the big factor, but I anticipate a troll TD from Everett, given that I had him in price last week based on some reports I read.
Yeah, I mean, even Hooverman, who saw 0 targets against Cardinals, but they blew them out. I did see 5 against the Rams. I mean, he saw 7. He saw 7 against the Chiefs last time, and the Chiefs are worse against the tight end than the wide receiver. So, with everyone focusing on Sutton, he could get there too. There's not
popular. It's going to tilt me. I'm such a sucker for him.
Right. The bare minimum tight end. Like I feel like every Sunday I have to open up one of the higher dollar tournaments and see who a Raven 52 played at tight end to see who I should have played at $2,500 at tight end. But I feel like there isn't one this week.
Yeah, I've been searching because there's a lot of teams I really love that need that $2,500 or $2,600 tight end. So I've been going through a lot of them. I'm glad you brought up Dixon. I was looking at him. I'm looking at these guys. I think Heuerman's interesting. So it's just, it's one of those spots that I don't hate punting, but
I mean, RSJ is probably the best punt play. I know there's still $500 between 3K and 2,500, but RSJ is probably one of the better punt.
Oh, for sure. I need
that 500.
Yeah, I need that.
I think there's value that RSJ knew the Arians offense, and he's been around Leftwich, so But I mean, he hasn't been very good this year. So that's the negative, and it looks like Gresham has been a little banged up again. So, if Gresham ends up being inactive, then that's a big boost for Ricky Seals. Any other last-minute thoughts on this slate, Hodge or Peter?
I don't think so. I think it's definitely a lot of spots to leverage some recency bias, so it should be a really fun week.
Yeah, I'm totally with you there. I love these weeks where you have a variety of high total games. I think in general, a lot of people will still get cute, try to find really contrarian stuff. There's just so many really good plays. I think ownership will kind of be evenly distributed. So play the guys you have the most conviction on. And thanks for the Fitzgerald call. That was really sharp, Proctor.
Of course, man.
I'll blame you on Twitter publicly if he goes for 0.
Yeah, I was gonna say hopefully it's pretty sharp because it sounds like we all just did a global swap.
I'm not. I really won't be like. I'm not results oriented like that. But I like that call a lot.
Well, Pete, dude, thanks for joining us. That's it for this week. Make sure you check us out on Slack on Sunday morning. We will be talking about all the updates. This is definitely a slate where there are some injuries that are going to, make some swings. Schefter bombs are definitely going to come into play. Pete, is there anything you want to pitch to the world before we get out of here? What's going on with Action Network right now?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thanks so much for having me. Love hanging out in your guys' Slack chat. You guys are doing awesome stuff, and admire the entrepreneurship that you guys have, and it's been really great. I wish I would have been subscribed during preseason. At the Action Network, we're doing a lot of cool stuff with win probability for betting. You can track your bets. Definitely some cool stuff there. Sports Insights, Fantasy Labs. So, yeah, we're trying to help sports speculators as much as we can, and obviously you guys are doing a great job too. So check out all those things, and hopefully everyone wins some money this weekend.
For sure. Yeah, and the absolute best page to monitor the lines is definitely the Action Network live odds page. So if you guys don't have that, it's not expensive.
The app is so good, man. Like, I know there's a bunch of people selling all the time and doing different things, but like I use the app every single day nonstop. Like even just sweating when half times are going to be over is a really cool feature.
Yeah. And one thing, people always ask me, like, how do I, what is reverse line movement? What is, what are indicators, this kind of stuff? If you get if you sign up for the Action Network stuff, you can look at the Sharp report, and it's going to do the work for you. So those kinds of questions that you guys have, it's going to show you stuff that has reverse line movement and stuff. So does the work for you. Definitely worth checking out. But Pete, man, thanks for coming on. Hodge, and I'm John, and we're out. Peace.